My daughter called me in the middle of the night. "Dad, I'm at the police station. My stepfather hit me, but now he's telling them I attacked him. They believe him." When I got to the precinct, the officer on duty went pale and stammered, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." Before we continue, don't forget to write in the comments what country you're from and how old you are. Enjoy listening. The phone rang at 3:17 a.m. on a Thursday in late October, the kind of night when the air is sharp enough to cut glass and the moon hangs low like a warning. I was already half awake in the way parents learn to be when their kids no longer live under the same roof, when every creak in the house could be a footstep or a heartbeat. The ringtone was Callie's favorite pop song, Nove's Sunflower Sky, slowed to an unsettling piano version she'd set up years ago, back when she was 15 and convinced the world would end if her playlist wasn't perfect. My hand found the phone in the dark, my thumb swiping before my eyes adjusted to the screen. The caller ID glowed. Bear Cub. "Cal? Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf caught in a squall, barely audible over what sounded like the buzz of background fluorescent lights. "I'm at the police station. My stepfather hit me, but now he's telling them I attacked him. They believe him." The words dropped like ice water poured straight into my veins, shocking every nerve awake. I was already pulling on a pair of jeans with one hand, the phone pressed to my ear with my shoulder. "Stay calm, Cal. I'm on my way. Don't you say another word until I'm there. Not one. You hear me?" I tried to fight back, but he's bigger, and the officers, they just looked at me like I was the problem. A sob broke through, raw and ragged. "There's blood on my sweatshirt, Dad. My sweatshirt. Please, just hurry." The line went dead. I stared at the screen. 3:19 a.m. Then I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and the old leather jacket I hadn't worn since the academy, the one with the frayed cuffs and the faint smell of gun oil still trapped in the lining. My truck roared to life before I'd even slammed the door. The drive to the Oak Haven Police Department took 23 minutes on empty streets, though every red light felt like a personal insult. Every shadow on the road, a taunt. My mind raced faster than the engine. Richard. Of course, it was Richard, Lisa's husband of 4 years, the man who'd walked into their lives with smooth stories, expensive watches, and a laugh that never quite reached his eyes. He'd once told me, straight-faced, that Callie was going through a phase when she came home with a C in algebra. I'd wanted to believe Lisa when she said he was good for them, good for her. I'd wanted my daughter to have a stable home, so I pulled double shifts at the security firm, telling myself retirement meant peace. What a fool I'd been. The fluorescent glare of the precinct spilled onto the wet pavement like a crime scene in reverse, harsh and unforgiving. I parked crooked, taking up 2 spots. I didn't care. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee, bleach, and something metallic underneath, blood or fear or both. Sergeant Miller looked up from the front desk. She recognized me. Caden Arlen, detective, retired, badge 4729, still in the system. She waved me through without a word, her eyes flicking toward the holding area with something like pity. Callie was sitting on a metal bench in the corner, knees pulled to her chest, one wrist cuffed to the rail with a plastic zip tie that had already raised red welts on her skin. A bruise the color of a ripe plum was blooming on her left cheekbone, spreading toward her temple like spilled ink. Her right eye was swelling shut, the lid puffy and glistening. Dried blood was caked over her eyebrow in a ragged line. She was wearing the same oversized sweatshirt she'd stolen from my closet last summer. Navy blue, Dad's property faded on the chest, now torn at the sleeve and stained dark at the collar. When she saw me, her face crumpled and she tried to stand, but the zip tie yanked her back down. Across the room stood Richard Lang, 6'2" and broad-shouldered, his expensive haircut artfully mussed just enough to look victimized, as if he'd practiced it in a mirror. He had a split lower lip, a thin line of dried blood at the corner, and a shallow scratch running along his jaw. He was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, wearing the same half-smirk he'd worn at our last family barbecue when he jokingly told Callie to smile more. because pretty girls don't frown. He had on a tailored charcoal coat over a white shirt, now flecked with what could have been her blood or his. Hard to tell under the lights. A young officer approached me. His nameplate read J. Carter. Early 20s, baby-faced, his Adam's apple bobbing like he'd swallowed a marble. His face drained of color the second our eyes met, going pale as printer paper. He fumbled with his clipboard, nearly dropping it, papers fluttering like startled birds. "Mr. Arlen," he stammered, his voice cracking on the second syllable. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." Didn't know what? That I was her father? That I'd spent 22 years putting men like Richard behind bars? That I still had friends in every precinct from here to the county line? Friends who owed me favors older than this kid? Carter led me past the desk toward a side office, his boots squeaking on the linoleum. Richard straightened up, his smirk faltering for half a second before snapping back into place. Callie lifted her head, her eyes wide with something between hope and terror. Hope that I could fix this. Terror that I couldn't. Another officer, Davis. I recognized her from the academy. Sharp eyes, a no-nonsense braid. She stood nearby, arms crossed, watching Richard like he was already a suspect, not a victim. "Cut the zip tie," I said, my voice flat enough to cut steel. Carter hesitated, glancing at his sergeant. "Sir, there's a protocol. Now." Davis stepped forward, produced a small blade, and sliced the plastic in a single smooth motion. Callie rubbed her wrist, red welts circling the bone like a bracelet of fire, and then she ran to me. Her whole body was shaking, shoulders, hands, knees. I held her at arm's length, examining every mark under the harsh lights. Finger-shaped bruises circled her upper arms, as if someone had tried to crush the bones. A cut over her eyebrow had dried, but it was still weeping fresh blood at the edge. Her lip was split in 2 places. She smelled like fear, copper, and the faint vanilla body spray she'd worn since middle school. Richard cleared his throat, his voice smooth as oil poured over broken glass. "She came at me with a kitchen knife, Caden. I was defending myself. Look at my face, look at my arms. She scratched me deep enough to scar." Callie's voice broke like thin ice. "He grabbed me by my hair, Dad. He slammed my face into the marble countertop 3 times. I never touched a knife. I was trying to get to the door." Carter's gaze darted between them. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning humming like a dying refrigerator. He pulled me aside into the narrow hallway that smelled of mildew and old paperwork, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Mr. Arlen, your daughter's phone recorded the whole incident. Audio only. She must have hit record when she dialed 911. We listened to it. It doesn't match Mr. Lang's statement. Not even close." Richard's face twitched, a muscle jumping in his jaw. That could be edited. Kids these days. AI apps. Deep fakes. Carter ignored him. His eyes flicked to the one-way glass where Davis now stood guard. "There's more. The 911 call. Your stepdaughter made it at 11:47 p.m. She said clear as day. He's hurting me. Please hurry. He won't stop." Then a crash, a scream, and the line went dead. "We have the timestamp. Lang claimed she dialed by accident while attacking him. Said she was hysterical." I looked at Richard. The smirk was gone, replaced by something colder, calculating. "The look of a man rerunning the odds," Carter continued, his voice barely a whisper now, as if he was afraid the walls were listening. When we ran his background, Lang's priors popped up like weeds. 3 domestic violence complaints in 2 states, Ohio, Nevada, sealed juvenile records, but still there if you know where to look. One involved a girlfriend who dropped the charges after he apologized. And, sir, your name flagged an alert in the system. You're the detective who put his brother away 15 years ago. Armed robbery at the gas station on 8th and Mercer. Tom Lang swore revenge in open court. Said he'd make Arlon pay for every year. The hallway tilted. I remembered the case like it was burned onto my retinas. Tom Lang, 22 years old, wild-eyed, caught on grainy surveillance footage pistol-whipping a clerk over $83 and a pack of Marlboros. I testified for 3 hours, walking the jury through the tape, frame by frame. Tommy got 25 to life. Richard had been 17 then, sitting in the gallery in an ill-fitting suit, shooting me death glares. I'd forgotten his face until this moment, until he wore that same hatred, aged into something polished and poisonous. Richard's eyes narrowed to slits. Coincidence? Ancient history. You can't prove. Carter wasn't finished. He pulled out his tablet, swiped to a still image. We pulled the security feed from the apartment hallway, Building C, 3rd floor. It shows Lang dragging your daughter inside by the arm at 11:42 p.m. There's no knife in her hand. She's struggling, trying to get away. Then the lights go out. Someone flipped the breaker. 43 seconds later, she stumbles out alone, bleeding, sweatshirt half off one shoulder, calling 911 from the payphone downstairs. The building manager confirmed the payphone works. He tested it himself at 11:50 p.m. because he heard the sirens. Callie buried her face in my shoulder, her tears soaking my shirt. I thought nobody would believe me. Mom's on that business trip in Denver. He said he'd tell everyone I was crazy, just like he told her I lied about the little things. The yelling, the shoving, the way he'd grab my wrist so hard it left marks under my long sleeves. He said if I told, he'd make sure I ended up in foster care. Richard took a step back, his coat rustling. Davis moved to block the exit, her hand resting on her holster with practiced ease. Carter turned to him, his voice firm now, all trace of a stammer gone. Richard Lang, you're under arrest for assault in the 2nd degree, filing a false police report, witness intimidation, and destruction of evidence. Richard lunged, not for the officers, but for Callie. A guttural sound ripped from his throat. I moved faster. 22 years of muscle memory kicking in. I shoulder-checked him into the cinder block wall with a dull thud that echoed like a gunshot. His head snapped back, eyes rolling. The cuffs were on before he could recover. Steel this time, not plastic. Davis read him his rights in a calm, clipped tone while he spat curses at the floor, at me, at the universe. As they led him away, he screamed over his shoulder, his voice breaking with rage. "This isn't over, Arlen. You'll see. I'll bury you." Carter took off his hat, scratching his shaved head, his cheeks flushed with shame. "I owe you both an apology. I bought the stepfather's story, hook, line, and sinker. Pretty girl in a hoodie, rich stepdad with a split lip, history of teenage rebellion. I ate it up. Even wrote possible self-defense in the initial report. It won't happen again. I've already called the watch commander. We're opening an internal review, and I'm volunteering for the training panel." Callie's fingers tightened around mine, her nails digging half-moons into my skin. "Can we go home?" "Not yet," I said, my voice softer now. "Hospital first. Pictures, statements, the whole 9 yards. We're doing this by the book. Every bruise, every cut. We document it all." In the ER, nurses moved with quiet efficiency under lights bright enough to sterilize souls. They documented every injury in high definition. The cheekbone bruise spreading like a thundercloud, the split lip with a loose flap of skin, the finger marks on her arms in perfect ovals, the older yellow-green marks on her ribs that made the nurse's jaw tighten into a hard line. A social worker named Juliana, late 40s, kind eyes, her clipboard held like a shield, took Callie's full statement behind a curtain while I waited outside. My fists clenched so tight my knuckles creaked like ice on a pond. When they were done, the doctor, a woman with steel-gray hair and a voice like warm tea, pulled me aside in the hallway that smelled of antiseptic and desperation. "Old fractures," she said quietly, looking at the chart. "Healed wrist from about 6 months ago. Hairline crack in 2 ribs. 3 months, maybe 4. This wasn't the first time. We're required to report suspected ongoing abuse to Child Protective Services and the DA's office. She'll need follow-up with a trauma specialist." The rage boiled, hot and black, but I swallowed it like bitter medicine. Callie needed me steady, not reckless. Not the cop who'd once kicked down a door without a warrant, not the father who wanted to hunt Richard down in the holding cell. Back at my house, a 2-story brick colonial on Maple Street, the quiet street Lisa had left when we divorced 8 years ago. We sat on the porch swing that creaked like an old friend. Dawn was painting the sky in bands of lavender and peach, the first light catching on the frost that glittered on the grass. Callie sipped hot chocolate from her old dinosaur mug, the green one with the chipped handle, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders like a cape. The bruise on her cheek looked worse in the daylight, the purple bleeding into blue. "I should have told you sooner," she whispered, steam rising from the mug. "About the yelling. The way he'd corner me in the kitchen when Mom was in the shower, how he'd say, 'Your mom works so hard. Don't stress her out with your drama.' I thought, if I can just stay quiet until college, until I turn 18 in 2 years. I put an arm around her, careful of the bruises. 'You're safe now. That's what matters, and you are never, ever going back there.'" My phone buzzed on the railing, a text from Lisa. "Just landed in Denver. 3-hour layover. What's going on?" Richard isn't answering. Callie's phone is going to voicemail. I'm worried. Then, 30 seconds later, "Call me now." I showed Callie. She bit her lip, wincing as it split open again, a single bead of blood welling up. "Mom's gonna freak out. She thinks I'm exaggerating. She always says I'm being sensitive." "Let her freak out," I said. "She needs to know who she married, and you're not sensitive. You're surviving." Lisa arrived at noon, eyes puffy from crying on the plane, her hair in a messy bun she hadn't worn since our college days, when we'd pull all-nighters studying for finals. She dropped her rolling suitcase in the entryway, the wheels still spinning, and ran to Callie, hugging her so tight I thought the ribs the doctor had warned about might crack again. Callie went stiff at first, arms hanging limp, and then she melted, her face crumpling into her mother's shoulder. "I'm so sorry, sweetie," Lisa kept saying, her voice muffled in Callie's hair. "I'm so sorry. I should have seen it. I should have listened." Richard's bail hearing was set for Monday. DA Monica Alvarez, a woman I'd worked with years back on a string of home invasions, was pushing for no bail, citing flight risk, the revenge motive, and the mountain of evidence. Lisa sat at my kitchen table, the same oak table where Callie had done her homework since she was 6, twisting a paper napkin into shreds. "He said Callie was imagining things," she said, her voice cracking like glass underfoot. "That she was jealous of our marriage, that she was acting out, skipping class, sneaking out with friends I'd never met. I defended him. I thought I was protecting our family." She looked at Callie, her eyes flooding. "How did I not see this? How did I let him convince me you were the problem?" Callie reached out and touched her mother's hand, her own fingers still swollen. "You didn't see. He hid it from both of us. He'd wait until you were in the shower or on a work call or asleep. He'd smile for you, and then—" She trailed off, shrugging, the movement small and pained. "He'd say things like, 'Your father left because you were too much.' I started to believe him." Lisa sobbed then, a sound that ripped through the room like a razor. I got her a glass of water. She left it untouched. Callie just patted her back with the clumsy tenderness of a child comforting a parent. Over the next few weeks, the case unraveled Richard completely, thread by thread, until he was naked before the law. Neighbors came forward. One, Mrs. Delgado from 3B, remembered hearing shouting and a dull thud that shook her ceiling. She'd thought it was the TV until she saw Callie limping to the bus stop the next morning, her hoodie pulled low. Another, a college kid from 2A, had footage on his Ring camera. Richard carrying a black toolbox down the hall at 12:03 a.m., looking around like he knew where the blind spots were. The apartment super, Mr. Patel, found the missing kitchen knife in that same toolbox, stashed behind paint cans, wiped clean, but with Callie's blood in the groove. The lab confirmed the DNA match in hours. The building's laundry room camera caught Richard ditching the torn-off sleeve of Callie's sweatshirt in the lint trap at 12:17 a.m., the sleeve with her blood and his skin cells under the nails where she'd scratched him in self-defense. The sweatshirt itself was recovered, bagged, tagged, and sent for testing. Tom Lang, Richard's brother, even sent a letter from prison, forwarded by the DA, postmarked from Ironwood State Penitentiary. Tell Arlen I'm sorry. My little brother always had a mean streak. Thought he outgrew it after juvie. Didn't know he'd go after a kid. If I'd been out, I'd have stopped him myself. Tell the girl she's stronger than the both of us put together. Richard took a plea deal. 7 years, no parole for 5, plus a permanent restraining order covering Callie, Lisa, and me by extension. Lisa filed for divorce that same week. He was served the papers in county jail by a sheriff's deputy who knew me from the old days. She moved into the spare bedroom down the hall from Callie's. She said she couldn't go back to that apartment, not even if it was exorcised by a dozen priests. Callie moved in with me permanently. We turned the guest room into her space over a long weekend, with fairy lights strung like constellations across the ceiling, a desk by the window overlooking the maple tree that dropped helicopter seeds every spring, posters of bands she loved, tacked up crooked because she insisted on doing it herself. She painted the walls a soft sage green, the color of new leaves, and hung a corkboard where she pinned debate trophies, college brochures, and a copy of the Arlon Protocol training handout. Some nights she woke up screaming, flailing against nightmares where Richard's hands were around her throat. I'd sit on the floor by her bed, my back against the wall, until her breathing evened out and the fairy lights painted soft galaxies on her face. We developed a system. 3 knocks on the wall if she needed me. No questions asked. I'd knock back twice. I'm here. One evening, 4 months after the arrest, we were eating pizza on the living room floor, the boxes open like a picnic on the worn Persian rug Lisa had left behind. Grease stained the carpet. Neither of us cared. Callie was looking at her phone. Then she looked up, her eyes bright despite the faint scar that now bisected her eyebrow. "Dad, remember Officer Carter?" she said. "He posted on the precinct's community page. He said because of what happened, the department is starting mandatory citywide training on domestic violence calls. They're using our case, anonymously, but they're still calling it the Arlon Protocol. It covers audio evidence, hallway cams, old fractures, everything." I raised an eyebrow, chewing pepperoni. "Kid, you just changed policy for 4,000 officers." She smiled. The first real smile in a long time, the kind that reached her eyes and crinkled the corners. "We changed it. You believe me first." Lisa appeared in the doorway holding a bowl of popcorn, seasoned with the truffle salt she'd discovered on a work trip. "Movie night. I vote for the one with the talking raccoon." Callie groaned dramatically. "Mom, we've seen it 12 times. 13th time's the charm, and I brought extra cheese." Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, soft and silent, blanketing the world in clean white. Callie cracked the window, letting the cold air kiss our faces. Snowflakes melted on her eyelashes like tiny stars. "You think we'll be okay?" she asked, her voice small but steady, the question she'd asked 100 times since that night. I pulled her close. Lisa joined on the other side, until we were a tangled pile of blankets, limbs, and laughter. Better than okay. We're unbreakable now. And for the first time in years, I believed it. But stories like ours don't have neat endings. They stretch, fray, and reweave themselves into something stronger. 6 months later, Callie started therapy twice a week with Dr. Chen, a trauma specialist who wore bright scarves and never rushed her. Some days she came home quiet, sketching in a leather-bound book she wouldn't let me see. Other days she'd burst through the door announcing she'd aced a physics exam or that the school paper wanted her to write an op-ed on teen advocacy. She joined the debate team, wearing her bruises like medals until they faded, and then using her voice as armor. Her first tournament, she took second place, arguing for mandatory mental health days in schools. The trophy sits on her desk, catching the fairy lights. Lisa sold the apartment using the money for Callie's college fund and a down payment on a small house 2 blocks away. Yellow siding, a wraparound porch, a kitchen big enough for Sunday pancakes. She and I learned how to co-parent without the old bitterness. Scheduled dinners, shared Google calendars, the whole deal. Some nights she'd stay for coffee after dropping Callie off, and we'd talk about everything except Richard, her new job at the marketing firm, my security consulting gigs, the way Callie's laugh had come back stronger than before. Carter, the young officer, showed up at our door one Saturday with a box of donuts and a shy smile that hadn't changed. "The training is going citywide," he said, shifting from foot to foot. "I wanted to thank you in person. And my sister was in a bad situation. Your daughter gave me the courage to help her leave. She's safe now." Callie hugged him so hard his hat fell off, rolling down the porch steps like a tumbleweed. Lisa took a picture. Carter, red-faced. Callie, beaming. Me, pretending to scold them for making a mess. A year after the arrest, Callie turned 18. We threw a party in the backyard. Fairy lights woven through the maple branches, mismatched lawn chairs, a playlist she made herself with songs that made Lisa groan and me pretend to hate them. Half the debate team showed up, plus Lisa's co-workers, even Officer Davis from the precinct, dressed in jeans instead of her uniform. Carter brought his sister, Marissa, who clung to Callie like a lifeline, whispering, "Thank you for the crisis line number," Callie texted me at 2 a.m. one night. At dusk, Callie pulled me aside by the maple tree, its leaves just starting to turn. She held out a small, smooth-sanded wooden box. "Open it." Inside was a keychain, a small silver tag engraved with Arlon Protocol on the front and in tiny letters on the back, "For the ones who believe us." "I had it made," she said, her eyes shining. "For you. For every kid who's scared to speak up. For every officer who learns to listen." I clipped it to my keys that night. It's still there, jingling against the key to the truck every morning. Richard tried to appeal his sentence at the 6-month mark, claiming new evidence, a witness who said Callie had a history of violence. The appeal died in committee. Too much documentation, too many witnesses, too many cameras. The witness turned out to be a cellmate, promised commissary money. Last I heard, Richard was in protective custody after starting a fight with the wrong inmate over the TV remote. Tom Lang wrote again, "Karma's slow, but she's thorough. Tell the girl she's a warrior." Callie graduated high school as valedictorian. She gave a speech about believing survivors that made the local news and went viral on the school district's Facebook page. Colleges sent acceptance letters thick as phone books. Stanford, NYU, State University. She chose State, close enough to come home on weekends, far enough to breathe on her own. Her essay, "The Night I Learned My Voice," was evidence. The night before she left for freshman orientation, we sat on the porch swing again, fireflies blinking in the yard like tiny lanterns. She was wearing the sweatshirt she'd stolen from me, now patched at the elbows with constellation fabric she'd sewn on herself. "Dad," she said, tracing the scar on her eyebrow, "remember when you'd tell me stories about your first patrol? How you thought you could fix everything with a badge and a flashlight?" I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I used to think justice was a gavel coming down in a courtroom. Now, I think it's quieter than that. "It's showing up at 3 a.m., she finished for me. "It's listening when a kid says, 'He hurt me,' instead of 'she's being dramatic.' It's choosing to believe the girl with the bruise over the man with the smile." I swallowed hard. "You planning on fixing the world, kid?" She smiled, the same one from when she was 6, and convinced she could catch fireflies in her pockets. "Starting with one dorm room at a time, then maybe law school, and then maybe the DA's office. Monica Alvarez said she'd write a recommendation." Move-in day was chaos. Boxes stacked like Jenga, nervous parents wiping away tears, RAs with clipboards and strained smiles. Lisa and I hauled the mini fridge up 3 flights of stairs while Callie directed traffic like a general, her ponytail swinging. When the last poster was hung, a print of Van Gogh's Starry Night over her desk, she hugged both of us, hard and fast. "I'll call every night," she promised. "You'd better," Lisa said, her voice cracking. "Only if there's drama," I added, trying for light. She rolled her eyes. "Dad." That night, my house felt too quiet. The fairy lights in her room still glowed through the open door. I sat in her desk chair, spinning slowly, and found the notebook she'd tucked under the mattress. Leather-bound pages, thick with sketches. Her bruises, fading panel by panel, then transforming into wings, then constellations, then a girl standing on a porch swing, holding a keychain up like a torch. On the last page, a single line in her neat, rounded handwriting. "We don't break, we orbit and light the way." I closed the book, left it on her desk for when she came home, and stuck a sticky note to the cover. Proud doesn't cover it. 2 years later, Callie interned at the district attorney's office under Monica Alvarez. She helped draft a bill expanding victim advocacy in schools, mandatory reporting training, anonymous tip lines, counselors in every high school. It passed committee 9-2. She was in the gallery when it was signed into law, wearing the same sweatshirt, now faded to a soft gray. Carter, now Detective Carter, testified in its favor, wearing the same shy smile, his badge polished to a high shine. Lisa started a support group for parents who hadn't seen the signs. Second Sight parents, they called themselves. 23 families the first year, 50 the next. They meet in the church basement on Tuesdays. No judgment, just coffee and truth. And me. I kept the keychain. I kept going to Callie's debates, Lisa's open houses, the precinct when Carter needed a guest speaker on how to read a room on a DV call. I started a mentorship program for retired cops, pairing them with kids in the youth system who reminded us of who we used to be. Some nights I still hear that 3:17 a.m. ringtone in my dreams. Sunflower Sky, slowed to a piano, Callie's voice breaking on a dad. But now, when I wake up, I know the story doesn't end in a police station with fluorescent lights and plastic cuffs. It ends, or rather, it begins, on a porch swing under a string of fairy lights, with a girl who learned to speak her truth into a microphone that carried across a whole city. A mother who learned to listen until her heart broke wide open. And a father who learned that justice isn't always a badge or a gavel. Sometimes it's a keychain engraved with a promise. Sometimes it's a story told so many times it becomes law. Sometimes it's just showing up again and again at 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. until the world believes you, until every kid with a bruise knows they aren't the problem, until every officer hesitates before believing the man with the smile, until every parent looks closer, until the cycle breaks and the light gets in. And on the nights the snow falls soft and silent, I sit on that porch swing alone, the keychain cool in my palm, and I know Callie is out there, orbiting, glowing, pulling others into her gravity, unbreakable, believing her home. Cal.